This video will show you how to use the DIDLS strategy to analyze tone in any type of writing. To use DIDLS to analyze tone, first we must think about what tone is. Tone can be described as the author's attitude toward the subject. This should be differentiated from the audience's attitude, which is often called mood. DIDLS is a strategy at getting at tone. DIDLS is an acronym that stands for diction, imagery, details, language, and syntax. If you think of tone like a complex puzzle, something that an author has put together in his work, think of DIDLS kind of like a strategy to take apart that complex puzzle. In this video, we will use DIDLS to analyze Shakespeare's Sonnet 116. So without any further ado, let's begin. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read the poem aloud, but it's always a good idea to read a poem out loud at least twice. Sonnet 116 can be found through Google search for the name of the sonnet, or in most literary anthologies. You might want to pause this video for a moment, find a copy of the poem, and read it through twice, as I recommended. Let's begin our DIDLS analysis with the first D, diction. Diction normally means words that an author chooses to use in his work. For our purposes, we're going to use diction in terms of the words that jump out at us at that first and second reading. For our example Sonnet 116, I've gone ahead and highlighted some of the words that stood out on my first reading. These words include the word marriage, obviously connecting with love, the word impediments, which could mean something that stops something, something that stands in the way. We have this phrase, ever fixed, this idea of eternity perhaps, and the word compass, which I know the word means a device that can be used in geometry or to find one's way, but it's being used in a different way in this case. We also have these words error and writ and proved. These are words that to me sound like argument. That word writ, I'm not sure that I've seen that word before, but I'm certain it has something to do with the word writing. Now, as I'm going through this, I'm doing a think aloud. I'm showing you through audio and through video what's going on inside my head as a first-time reader. As a first-time reader, I'm not totally sure what this poem's about. And I know a lot of students come to poetry and feel that same way, that it's this dense piece of writing and they're not sure what they're supposed to get out of it. It's okay to feel lost in the woods right now. Again, we're using this DIDLS strategy to help us get from not understanding anything about the poem perhaps to an understanding of the author's tone. Next, let's take a look at the I in DIDLS, which stands for imagery. That's anything you can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell in the poem or work. I've gone ahead and highlighted some things that stood out to me previously. For instance, tempest, which I know means storms. That's something I can see. There's also the star. That's a very visual thing as well, those points in the sky. We have rosy lips and cheeks, something that I can feel as well as see, something that relates to love or maybe youth as well. We have this bending sickle, this device that the character Death brings with him, something I can easily picture and imagine what it feels like, the cold of the steel. The next part of our DIDLS is the second D, which stands for details, and that's the opinion of the speaker, usually brought through facts or through argument. So again, I've gone ahead and highlighted some things that I saw in Sonnet 116. Having already read the poem multiple times in order to work through my DIDLS strategy, I know that Shakespeare makes some strong statements in this poem. So I'm going to go ahead and look for statements of fact that I can maybe use for my analysis of details. For instance, the first statement of fact that I saw, love is not love which alters when it alteration finds. This is a strong statement where Shakespeare seems to be saying that if love bends when it comes to an obstacle, maybe it's not really love. Next, we have this idea of love being an ever-fixed mark, something that doesn't move no matter what happens. It stays unchanged, like that star. Then we have this idea of love not being time's fool, that whatever time may do the ravages of age, love doesn't bend. And at the bottom, we have this really, really strong statement that really stood out to me. If this be error, if everything Shakespeare is saying is error, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. Again, we're talking about details that lead to Shakespeare's opinion. Well, I'm still not necessarily sure what Shakespeare's opinion is, but I know that whatever it is, he believes strongly in it, to the point where he's saying, if I'm wrong here, then I never wrote a thing, which from the Bard is a serious statement. Next, we're going to look at the L in DIDLS, which stands for language. And in this, we're looking at the language of the entire poem. It's a little bit different from the diction we did earlier. Here we want to come up with words that could describe the way that the writer uses language throughout the entire work. So I've gone ahead and put some key terms, some things that I found. From my multiple readings of this poem, I think Shakespeare, his language is esoteric, moralistic, but I think more than anything it's emphatic. When I say esoteric, I mean that his language uses these terms like star and tempest, these words that to me were a little confusing at first. When I say moralistic, I mean that he is very, he almost sounds religious in his conviction in what he's saying about love. But I think the word that best describes the language is emphatic. He's serious about what he's saying, he says it with passion, which is appropriate to this subject, and he really truly believes in it. And I can tie that back to the details analysis we did previously, those last few lines where Shakespeare said, if I'm wrong, then I never wrote. He's being emphatic here. He really believes in what he's saying. Now on to the final part of our DIDLS analysis, the final S for syntax, or sentence structure. I find that students often have trouble with this, and so a good place to start is just to find the ending punctuation inside poems. Often students get lost in the stanzas and forget that poems are made up of sentences just like any other type of writing. And one of the first punctuation marks I see is the exclamation mark here after this line of love is not love which alters. Shakespeare's saying, oh no, love isn't something that alters. And this relates back to that word I used before. I said that he was emphatic in his opinion. Well, now we're actually finding evidence for that. I said I wasn't sure what his opinion was. Well, now I know he's being emphatic about his idealized conception of love. Additionally, I see the colons and semicolons here, this punctuation that has these lines add on to each other. And I get the sense that Shakespeare is almost breathless. He keeps adding on these statements about love and he keeps explaining it. And finally, we have these last two lines that are offset, which in poetry, anytime something's offset or a line is skipped, this kind of shift means that something important is happening here. And again, we've encountered this line before, this idea of, if I'm wrong, then I never wrote, and how serious of a statement that is from a poet like Shakespeare. You might have noticed that I've been kind of recursively moving through the poem, returning to the same ideas over and over again. And that's okay. By the end of the DIDLS analysis, hopefully you're getting to a point where you're making interpretive statements like I've been doing. So now that we've run through our DIDLS analysis, our diction, imagery, details, language, and syntax, it's time to make an argument as to what the tone is. Go ahead and do a Google search on tone words, and you'll find dozens of lists. The key is to find one that makes sense to you and that's laid out in the way you like. I like the tone word lists that are divided by connotation, based on if the tone word is humorous, or a positive connotation or negative connotation. Keep in mind that tone is complex and multifaceted. It might take more than one word to describe the tone in a given piece. The key to your tone statement is that you're able to back up what you say the tone is with evidence from the text. Finally, we come to our tone statement. Based on my DIDLS analysis and everything I've learned from the poem, I think that Shakespeare is being idealistic and sincere. Those two words can describe the tone in this poem. He's idealistic in that he is very strong in his opinion about love. He holds it up as an ideal and says what it is and what it isn't, and his viewpoint doesn't leave much room for any kind of maneuvering. He's sincere in that what he's saying he believes so strongly in. He's willing to, in those last two lines, stake his entire reputation on his point that he makes in this poem. Now, are these the only two tone words that can describe this sonnet? Absolutely not. Is this the best tone argument? Perhaps not. You could maybe make a better one. That's not the point. The point is, can you use the evidence you gathered in your DIDLS analysis of diction, imagery, details, language, and syntax to support an argument about the tone in the poem? If you can, you're well on your way to better understanding tone. Thanks for watching, language lovers, and good luck on your future English explication endeavors. Inside your fetal brain, there's